A Confederate soldier's morphine dependency created the world's most valuable brand. But what Coca-Cola doesn't want you to know is that their secret formula once contained psychoactive ingredients. They collaborated with Nazis, and they may have blood on their hands. This is the disturbing truth behind the happiest drink on earth. The secret ingredient. It is the most famous trade secret in history, a recipe locked in a vault, guarded with military precision. But the original, closely guarded secret wasn't about 11 herbs and spices. It was about a potent, psychoactive powder derived from the South American coca leaf. The story of Coca-Cola begins not in a boardroom, but on the battlefields of the Civil War. John Stith Pemberton was a Confederate colonel who sustained grievous wounds at the Battle of Columbus. In the aftermath, he, like countless veterans, became dependent on morphine to manage his chronic pain. This reliance became an agonizing affliction, a chain he would spend the rest of his life trying to break. Pemberton was a pharmacist by trade, and he dedicated his remaining years to finding a nerve tonic, a miracle cure that could alleviate his own suffering. His first major attempt was a concoction called Pemberton's French Wine Coca, launched in 1884. It was a direct imitation of a popular European beverage, Vin Mariani. The formula was a potent brew of Bordeaux wine, caffeine from the African cola nut, and a substantial measure of coca leaf extract. It was sold as a cure-all. A tonic for the nerves, a remedy for exhaustion, and a solution for the very dependency Pemberton himself was fighting. This wasn't unusual. The late 19th century was the golden age of patent medicines. The public marketplace was flooded with elixirs, syrups, and tonics, all promising miraculous results. They were almost entirely unregulated. Bottles of soothing syrup for infants were laced with opium. Remedies for common ailments contained heavy narcotics. This was the world that birthed Coca-Cola. It was not an invention of refreshment, it was a product of a medical free-for-all. Pemberton's enterprise was an immediate local success. But just 2 years later, in 1886, his home city of Atlanta passed prohibition and temperance laws, banning the sale of alcohol. His entire business model evaporated overnight. Scrambling to save his product, Pemberton raced to reformulate. He removed the Bordeaux wine and replaced it with a sugary syrup, mixing it with carbonated water to mask the bitterness. He kept the two signature ingredients, the stimulating cola nut and the euphoric coca leaf. His bookkeeper, Frank Robinson, suggested the name. They marketed the new concoction as the temperance drink, a delicious, exhilarating, and harmless alternative to alcohol. The new beverage was an instant sensation, but not just because it was sweet. Customers reported a feeling of exhilaration, a burst of energy and focus. They weren't just buying a soda, they were buying a feeling. The company's own advertising was explicit, calling it invigorating and exhilarating. The formula had made Pemberton a local celebrity, but it would not make him a rich man. His health was failing, and his finances were in ruins. The pharmacist had invented a global icon, but he was about to lose control of it, selling his creation for a handful of cash to a man who saw its true potential. The $5 formula. How do you buy a global empire for the price of a used car? You wait for its ailing creator, desperate and ravaged by his own dependencies, to be on his last legs. Then, you make your move. John Pemberton's health was in steep decline, his body and finances wrecked by his long-standing affliction. He was desperate for cash. Into this void stepped Asa Candler, a savvy Atlanta pharmacist with a talent for promotion and an iron will for business. When Pemberton passed away in 1888, he was penniless. Candler, through a series of shrewd and aggressive maneuvers, consolidated the full rights for a total sum of around $2,300. Candler knew he wasn't selling a simple beverage. He was selling an idea. He immediately plastered Frank Robinson's elegant script logo on every available surface: barn walls, drugstore awnings, and newspaper advertisements. He distributed thousands of coupons for a free glass of Coca-Cola, a novel tactic that ensured everyone would at least try it. He handed out clocks, calendars, and serving trays, all bearing the company's branding, inserting his product into the daily fabric of American life. Pemberton had invented a tonic, Candler was inventing a national icon, but there was a growing shadow. The public's perception of the coca leaf's alkaloid was souring, with sensationalized stories linking it to crime and societal disorder. Candler was a devout Methodist. He wanted respectability. He saw that the future of his company lay not in the patent medicine aisles, but in the mainstream. In 1903, under immense public pressure, Candler made the most important change in the formula's history. He ordered the removal of the active psychoactive compounds from the coca leaf extract. But here is the critical detail. Coca-Cola never removed the coca leaf. To this day, the formula still uses decocainized coca leaf extract as a flavoring agent. The company is granted special federal permission to import tons of the leaf from South America to a single, highly secure chemical plant in New Jersey. This facility, operated by the Stepan Company, is the only one in the United States legally allowed to process the coca leaf. The secret ingredient was neutralized, but its ghost remains in the recipe. Asa Candler had pulled off an astonishing feat of corporate alchemy. He took a potent patent remedy born from one man's suffering, scrubbed it of its most controversial component, and repackaged it as a wholesome, all-American symbol. He didn't just build a company, he laundered a reputation, erasing its origins from the public's memory. The brand was now safe, its image scrubbed clean. But as its ambition grew, it would soon face a test of morals, forcing it to choose between patriotism and profit inside the borders of the Third Reich. The Third Reich's thirst. As Allied soldiers prepared to confront the German regime, one iconic American brand was not just operating deep inside the Third Reich, it was thriving. In the 1930s, Coca-Cola was on a mission for global domination. Germany, with its burgeoning economy, was one of its most profitable and fastest-growing markets. This is where the story pivots from corporate expansion to a disturbing tale of allegiance. The man in charge of Coca-Cola GmbH, the company's German operations, was Max Keith. He was not a passive manager, he was a zealous devotee of the brand. As the German government tightened its grip on Europe, Keith maneuvered with astonishing skill, ingratiating himself with the bureaucracy to protect the company's assets. Historical records show Keith holding massive Coca-Cola conferences for his employees, events reportedly draped in the banners of the company alongside the swastika. He was a master of political survival, positioning Coke as a symbol of national vitality, in harmony with the spirit of the new Germany. Then came 1941 and the attack on Pearl Harbor. The United States officially entered the war. Suddenly, Max Keith was completely cut off. The supply chain from America, which provided the secret flavoring concentrate known as Merchandise 7X, was severed. But Max Keith refused to let his empire crumble. If he couldn't get the official syrup, he would invent his own beverage to keep the bottling plants humming and the company profitable under German rule. He scrambled for ingredients in a war-torn, heavily rationed economy. He used the scraps of other industries, apple fibers from cider presses and whey, the watery, protein-rich by-product of cheese production. He called this new creation Fanta, from the German word Fantasie, or imagination. It was a golden-colored, fruity-tasting soda, and it was an immediate success. Fanta kept the German bottling plants operational for the entire duration of the conflict. It became a ubiquitous drink within the Third Reich, consumed by the German public and, by extension, its military apparatus. Keith was even given control of Coca-Cola's operations in other occupied territories as the German war machine advanced. When the war finally ended and American executives re-established contact, they didn't find a rogue agent. They found a hero who had not only protected all the company's assets, but had also generated enormous profits from his new invention. Keith was celebrated for his unwavering loyalty to the Coca-Cola Company and was promoted, eventually running all of Coca-Cola's European operations. The corporation took ownership of the Fanta brand, and its wartime origins were quietly scrubbed from the marketing. It was a chilling display of corporate pragmatism, where the lines of allegiance blurred completely. The company had survived the war not by choosing a side, but by serving both. This, however, was not the last time the company's global operations would be linked to brutal actors and organized violence. The Coca-Cola Death Squads. For most of the world, a Coke is a symbol of happiness. But for union organizers at a bottling plant in Colombia, the iconic red and white logo became a symbol of terror. The 1990s and early 2000s were a time of intense civil conflict in Colombia. In this volatile landscape, labor unions were often viewed as subversive elements by powerful business interests. At the center of this storm was Sinel-Trainel, the National Union of Food Industry Workers. They were organizing for better wages and safer working conditions at several Coca-Cola bottling plants. What followed was a campaign of systematic and brutal intimidation. Union leaders began to receive terrifying threats. They were harassed, abducted, and subjected to severe physical abuse. The message was simple: stop organizing or face the ultimate consequence. The allegations came to a horrifying climax at a bottling plant in Carapa. A union leader named Isidro Gil was at the factory gate when armed paramilitaries arrived on motorcycles. They ended his life right on company property. Sinel-Trainel documented a pattern of violence across the country, claiming that multiple union members associated with the bottling plants had their lives unlawfully taken, while others were forced into exile. In 2001, the union, alongside the United Steelworkers of America, filed a landmark lawsuit in the United States. The case, Sinel-Trainel v. The Coca-Cola Company, did not just accuse the local bottlers. It aimed directly at the parent corporation in Atlanta. The suit alleged that the Coca-Cola Company knew about, benefited from, and implicitly tolerated the bottlers' use of these violent militias to crush the union. The company's response was swift and total. Coca-Cola headquarters unequivocally denied the allegations. They stated these were independent bottlers they did not own or control, and that they had no knowledge of the horrific acts. The United States courts ultimately dismissed the case, ruling that it was outside their jurisdiction and that the parent company could not be held liable for the actions of its independent partners in a foreign civil conflict. But the dismissal was not an acquittal. The questions at the heart of the case were never answered in a courtroom. It's a narrative of profit and power, where the cost of a cheap beverage in one country was allegedly paid by the blood and fear of workers in another. The allegations cast a long, dark shadow over the brand's cheerful image. And it wasn't the only time the company's thirst for resources would be accused of leaving a community devastated. Draining the developing world. It takes almost 3 liters of water to make 1 liter of Coke. It's a statistic that means little in most of the world, but in the drought-stricken villages of India, it became a devastating calculation. The story begins in the year 2000, in the rural community of Plakimada in the state of Kerala. Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverages, a subsidiary of the global giant, opened a massive bottling plant. Almost immediately, the local people noticed a terrifying change. The water, their most essential resource, began to disappear. Plakimada is an agricultural community. Its people depend on wells for drinking, washing, and irrigating their coconut groves and rice paddies. Within a year of the plant's opening, these wells, which had sustained the community for generations, started to run dry. The company's massive borehole wells were plumbing the depths of the aquifer, siphoning millions of liters of water a day to produce its beverages. The local people, relegated to shallow hand-dug wells, were left with the dregs. The agricultural backbone of the entire community began to collapse. The local population, led primarily by village women who were forced to walk miles for potable water, began to protest. They claimed the plant was not just taking their water, it was poisoning their land. This led to a second, more sinister allegation. The company was accused of distributing its industrial waste to the local farmers, marketed as free fertilizer. But subsequent tests by independent organizations alleged that the sludge contained dangerous levels of heavy metals, including lead and cadmium. These toxic materials were leaching into the already stressed soil and groundwater. The fertilizer was not a gift. It was, as protesters claimed, a contamination. The company vehemently denied these claims. It stated its water usage was legal and within government-approved limits, blaming the water shortages on poor monsoon seasons. It insisted the sludge was harmless and met all safety standards. But the local government, the village council, sided with the protesters. They revoked the plant's license in 2003, sparking a legal battle that would go all the way to the state's high court. In 2004, after 4 years of relentless protest, the plant was forced to shut down. It was a stunning victory for the villagers, but the scars remain. The aquifer was severely depleted, and the soil in many areas remained contaminated, a lasting testament to the conflict. The story of Plachimada became a case study in resource extraction, revealing the staggering power imbalance between multinational corporations and the developing communities they operate in. It demonstrated that the hidden cost of a bottle of soda could be the complete desiccation of a village. The company had proven it could reshape a community's physical environment. Its next feat would be even more ambitious, reshaping a global, cultural icon in its own image. The St. Nicholas takeover. We all know what Santa Claus looks like. He is a jolly, heavy-set man with a white beard, dressed in red and white. But he did not always look that way. His modern image was not born at the North Pole, it was born in a corporate marketing department. Before the 1930s, the figure of Santa Claus was in flux. He was a gaunt bishop, a green-robed Father Christmas, or the jolly old elf from Clement Clarke Moore's poem. He was a recognizable idea, but not a singular, stable image. In the late 1920s, the Coca-Cola company had a business problem. Its product was overwhelmingly viewed as a summer drink. When the weather turned cold, sales plummeted. The company needed a way to connect its sugary, cold beverage to the warmth and joy of the winter holidays. They needed a salesman so powerful he could make drinking a cold soda in December feel natural. In 1931, the company turned to a commercial illustrator named Haddon Sundblom. Their directive was to create a Santa Claus that was wholesome, realistic, and warm. The figure Sundblom painted was a radical departure. He was not a gaunt saint or a tiny elf. He was a full-sized, robust, grandfatherly man. His cheeks were rosy, his beard was magnificent, and his eyes twinkled with a paternal warmth. In their place, he wore a plush suit, cinched with a large belt. The color of that suit was a vibrant, unmistakable Coca-Cola red. The ad campaign was an immediate and overwhelming success. From 1931 until 1964, Sundblom would create a new portrait of this Santa every year. His Santa was shown pausing on his Christmas Eve rounds, raiding a refrigerator, playing with children, and always holding an ice-cold bottle of Coke. This was not just a successful campaign, it was a cultural takeover. The company's marketing reach was so vast and so total that Sundblom's vision became the only vision. The company, of course, disputes this, noting that other artists had drawn red-suited Santas before. But it was the relentless, decades-long, multi-million-dollar push by Coca-Cola that cemented this specific image in the global consciousness. The old versions, the stern bishop, the green-robed elf, were overwritten. They faded from cultural memory, replaced by the grandfather who drank soda. The corporation had achieved something unprecedented. It had absorbed a global myth and permanently redefined it to suit its own brand. The company had successfully convinced the world that its product was synonymous with joy and tradition. Its next, more disturbing challenge would be to convince the world that this same product was not a primary driver of a growing global health crisis. The sweet poison. The formula has changed over the decades. The potent alkaloid is long gone, but one ingredient has remained constant, its quantity swelling over time: sugar. This is the story of how Coca-Cola sold happiness in a bottle while fueling a global health crisis. In the 20th century, Coca-Cola did not just conquer the globe, it fundamentally changed how the world drinks. This unprecedented expansion, celebrated in boardrooms, ran in perfect parallel to another, more alarming global trend: the explosion of obesity and type 2 diabetes. A single 12-ounce can of Coke contains a staggering 39 grams of sugar. It is, by any clinical definition, a liquid candy, a massive, immediate caloric load with almost no nutritional value. As public health officials and scientists began to sound the alarm, identifying sugary soft drinks as a primary culprit in the metabolic disease epidemic, the company faced an existential threat. Instead, it allegedly adopted a strategy of calculated misdirection, a playbook perfected by another embattled industry, big tobacco. The most glaring example came to light in 2015. A press investigation revealed that Coca-Cola had provided millions of dollars in funding to create a scientific non-profit called the Global Energy Balance Network. Its public-facing message, promoted by respected academics, was simple and seductive. The key to health was not about what you ate, it was about how much you moved. The network's researchers argued that the focus on demon foods and sugary drinks was misguided. The problem, they insisted, was not the 39 grams of sugar. The problem was that you were not exercising enough to burn it off. It told a world consuming more and more empty calories that their health problems were a personal failing, a simple lack of willpower, not the result of a product engineered for maximum consumption. When the funding was exposed, the backlash was immediate and fierce. Public health experts labeled it a classic example of science for hire, a front group designed to launder corporate talking points. The Global Energy Balance Network was disbanded in disgrace just months after the story broke. But this was just one part of a much larger strategy. For years, the company had also funded health and fitness organizations, nutrition conferences, and medical journals. This web of influence created a chilling effect, where scientists became hesitant to pursue research critical of the industry. The company had spent a century selling a soft drink as a symbol of joy. Its greatest marketing feat, however, was its attempt to convince the public that the very thing making them unwell was not the problem at all. This mastery of image, however, was the result of a long and calculated evolution, one that saw the company moving from overt prejudice to a carefully curated image of global harmony. Marketing in black and white. Today, Coca-Cola is a symbol of global unity, famous for its Hilltop ad, a vision of a world singing in perfect harmony. But for most of its history, the company's advertising sold a very different, and much uglier, version of America. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as the brand was weaving itself into the fabric of American life, its marketing directly reflected the deeply ingrained prejudices of the era. These ads featured offensive caricatures of African Americans. They were depicted in minstrel-like poses, often as wide-eyed, subservient figures, laborers, or porters, tasked with serving the beverage to white patrons. The imagery was not accidental. It was a deliberate marketing choice, reinforcing the existing social hierarchy. While the company's main campaigns focused on an idyllic, white, middle-class America, the portrayal of minorities, when it happened at all, was relegated to these crude stereotypes. As the civil rights movement began to gain momentum, the company's strategy was not one of inclusion, but of avoidance. They were replaced by something almost as telling: complete erasure. For years, mainstream national Coca-Cola advertising simply pretended black consumers did not exist. The company operated on a segregated marketing model. It had its white ads and, separately, a much smaller, targeted effort for the black market. It wanted the dollars from the black community, but it was terrified of alienating white consumers, particularly in the segregated South. By showing an integrated America, this calculated pragmatism extended beyond America's borders. As the world began to protest the apartheid system in South Africa, Coca-Cola, like many multinationals, continued to operate there. It maintained bottling plants in the country, profiting from a segregated economy and becoming a prime target for international boycotts. Protesters saw the company's presence as tacit support for the oppressive regime. The company defended its position, arguing that it was a force for positive change from within. It was not until the 1960s and 70s, forced by shifting social tides and the growing economic power of black consumers, that the company began its slow, calculated pivot toward integration. It effectively rebranded Coca-Cola as a force for peace and global unity. But this pivot was not a revolution, it was an evolution of strategy. The company's relationship with cultural portrayal has always been one of pragmatism. It reflected the nation's prejudices until it was no longer profitable, then seamlessly rebranded itself as the very harmony it had once ignored. The company had learned to master its image in the complex tapestry of American society. But in a small South American nation, it would face a completely different kind of challenge, a bright yellow, bubblegum-flavored soda it simply could not beat. The ghost of the Andes, Coca-Cola's global dominance is almost total. In nearly every nation on Earth, the red and white script reigns supreme. But there is one exception, one market it could not conquer, a nation in the Andes where the national obsession is a bright yellow soda that tastes like bubblegum. The drink is called Inca Kola. To the uninitiated, its flavor is baffling. It is a neon yellow, intensely sweet liquid, often compared to bubblegum or pineapple. But to the people of Peru, it is more than a drink. It is a national symbol. It is a ubiquitous presence at every dinner table, a mandatory accompaniment to the nation's most famous dishes, from ceviche to lomo saltado. The brand's slogan was simple and powerful: El sabor del Perú, the taste of Peru. It was not just a product, it was an institution. When the Coca-Cola Company arrived, it expected an easy victory. It was the 1950s, and the corporation was at the height of its global expansion. It prepared for a swift, decisive conquest. What followed was one of the most stunning failures in the company's history. The Cola Wars in Peru were a decades-long, humiliating stalemate for the Atlanta giant. Every time Coca-Cola launched a massive ad campaign, Inca Kola sales would simply rise. The company leaned heavily into its local identity. While Coke was the taste of the world, Inca Kola was the taste of home. The local loyalty was unshakable. Peruvian fast food chains were compelled to sell Inca Kola. In a move unthinkable anywhere else, even McDonald's, Coca-Cola's most powerful global partner, had to bow to local pressure and sell the bright yellow soda right alongside the Big Mac. For Coca-Cola, it was the one market they could not crack. They threw millions of dollars at the problem. Inca Kola remained the undisputed champion. By the late 1990s, executives were forced to accept a frustrating reality. They could not beat this family-owned, single-country soda. So, they changed the strategy. If competition had failed, assimilation was the only answer. In 1999, the corporation announced a shocking move. It paid an estimated $300 million to acquire a 49% controlling stake in the Inca Kola brand and its parent corporation. Coca-Cola had neutralized its most stubborn rival by simply purchasing it. The Cola Wars in Peru did not end with a victory. They ended with a transaction. It stands as a chilling parable of modern corporate strategy. If you cannot conquer your rival, you simply purchase them, ensuring that no matter which bottle the customer chooses, the house always wins. This failure to win the public's loyalty, however, would soon be repeated on a much grander and more catastrophic scale, right in its own backyard. The Revolt of 1985. In 1995, Coca-Cola made a fatal calculation. They thought they were just changing a drink. They did not realize they were desecrating a holy relic. For the first time in its century-long history, the king was bleeding. Pepsi, the long-time underdog, had launched a brilliant and relentless campaign, the Pepsi Challenge. It was a simple, blind taste test, and its results were terrifying for the executives in Atlanta. A majority of consumers, when stripped of the branding, preferred the sweeter, smoother taste of Pepsi. A mood of panic set in. The executives felt they had no choice. They had to change the sacred formula. It was a top-secret project, code-named Project Kansas. After conducting 200,000 consumer taste tests, the company's chemists had developed a new formula. It was smoother, sweeter, and scientifically engineered to beat Pepsi in every blind test. On April 23, 1985, the company held a massive press conference. They announced that the original, 99-year-old formula was being retired. It would be replaced by this new, improved version, officially branded as New Coke. The company's chief executive called it the surest move the company has ever made. The public reaction was not just negative. It was immediate, visceral, and overwhelming. The company's headquarters was flooded with angry phone calls, peaking at over 8,000 a day. The mailroom was buried under a mountain of furious letters, many addressed to Chief Dodo. The company's CEO. People were not just disappointed, they were grieving. They described the change in deeply personal, emotional terms. They felt betrayed. This was not a consumer preference, it was an identity crisis. Loyalists formed protest groups. The Old Cola Drinkers of America was founded, staging rallies and distributing T-shirts. One man in Seattle filed a lawsuit to force the company to bring back the original. Across the country, devoted customers began hoarding cases of classic Coke, treating it like a precious commodity, a cultural artifact that had been slated for extinction. The company had spent millions on research, but they had fundamentally misunderstood what they were selling. They thought they were selling a flavored, sweetened water. The public knew they were buying something else, a piece of Americana, a taste of home, a symbol of stability. After just 79 days of relentless, brutal, and humiliating public outcry, the company surrendered. On July 11, 1985, they held another press conference. They announced that the original formula was returning, branded as Coca-Cola Classic. The failure of New Coke is now a legendary business case study. But the true, disturbing lesson is not that the new product failed. It is why it failed. Coca-Cola had spent a century succeeding too well. It had woven its product so deeply into the personal and national identity of a country that its customers felt a deep psychological violation when it was altered. The company did not just have consumers, it had followers. And they had just learned, in the most public way possible, that their holy relic was not to be tampered with. From a secret formula to a global empire, the brand's cheerful logo hides a complex and often disturbing past. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden histories, show your support by liking this video and subscribe for more stories hidden just beneath the surface.